Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad. In today's program, we are going to talk about the 16th BRICS summit that is underway in Russia's city of Kazan, which spans for 3 days from 22nd to 24th of October. Russian President Vladimir Putin has welcomed the visiting dignitaries, and he has also had bilateral meetings on the sidelines of this high-level moot. Now, Kremlin Foreign Affairs Advisor Yuri Ushakov says, let me quote, "The summit is the largest foreign policy event ever held by Russia, with 36 countries and more than 20 of them represented by heads of state," unquote. Now, following key points have also been deliberated upon by the world leaders at this high-level multilateral forum summit, and according to the BRICS declaration, which include the situation in the Ukraine, the situation in the Middle East, and also the Western sanctions have also been talked about. We'll also be talking in detail as to what has been discussed under that particular head. The international financial systems reform, BRICS gaining grain exchange on BRICS cross-border payment system, as well as on BRICS clear depository, on financial innovation, on the IMF, on G20, and a number of other heads, including on prevention of future pandemics. These are the important points which have been deliberated upon at this particular high-level summit. We'll also be discussing the possibility of the membership of Pakistan of BRICS and what is required in order to get that, and what sort of potential benefits are associated for Pakistan after Pakistan becomes the member of BRICS. All these important matters are for discussion in today's show. For that, we are honored to be joined in the studio by Dr. Manzoor Afridi, Foreign Affairs expert. Dr. Afridi, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we're honored to be joined by Mr. Yasir Janjua, Senior Analyst. Mr. Janjua, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Later on Skype, we'll also be joined by Mr. Mian, sanaUllah, former ambassador. As he joins in, I'll be going towards him as well. Let me begin the discussion with you, Dr. Afridi. Now, this BRICS summit, what was the idea behind the creation of this particular multilateral forum, and do you think that it actually offers to be an alternative or a counterweight to the Western multilateral fora?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Tehami sahab. BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It's intergovernmental grouping or a kind of forum of the global South countries, which was initiated and launched in 2009, mainly by Russia. Later on, it was joined by the South Africa, and now, 5 countries. And at this summit, which is the 16th one that's going on in Kazan, Russia, so 4 new members, those are joining this group: Ethiopia, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, and Iran. So that's why now it is gaining more momentum and strength. So if we look about the history or the most preferred motive or objective behind the creation of the BRICS, that was to have a voice of the Global South. So Global South, according to the UNCTAD, United Nations Council for Trade and Development, the Latin American countries, Caribbean states, Africa, Oceania, excluding Australia and New Zealand, the Fiji Islands, the Marshall Islands, and the Papua New Guinea, such kind of countries. And Asia, excluding South Korea and Japan, such countries. So these areas or regions of the world, those consist of Global South. So generally, we can say that the developing countries are where the living standard that's not very much good, where there is more inflation, or the job market that's not really properly arranged or educate, where the health facilities or the education facilities are not very good as compared to the global north. So the main purpose was just to have their voice, their say, their concern to be heard in the international community, in the international institutions, and a kind of dominance or hegemony of the Western countries, the United States and its allies or its friends throughout the globe, just to have a kind of alternative in this regard. So mainly if we see the history, so from the financial transactions or the financial arrangements, what BRICS wanted to ensure later on, we have seen in the shape of the BRICS Pay, which is a system just to coordinate among all the member countries of the BRICS, their central banks have to have more benefit and how they can learn from each other experiences. And later on, so mainly it's a kind of the bloc of the developing, emerging, big economies of the global south. So there are opinions, many experts, they opine about the alternative, a counterbalance to the Western nations, like BRICS has already developed a bank, against the Western domination or their monetary and financial institutions. So now about the expansion, which was already decided last year at the 15th summit, that now there would be more expansion of the BRICS. And now in this KAZAN summit, we are seeing and we are observing that yes, 4 more members they have joined, and even Pakistan very near to join it. So the more expansion, and even the Latin American countries, they have shown their interests. Some from the North American countries, Central American states, they have showed their interest to join BRICS. So I think if not in a compact form, in a solid form, just to say to have a kind of a rival, intense rivalry, it's not like that. But in far future, we can say that yes, at least it can serve as a check and balance on the domination of the Western nations on international diplomacy, international law, the monetary institutions, even the United Nations. So in this regard, we can say that yes, it is a hope, like we have already experienced within the United Nations General Assembly, the G77 that it was developed with the support of the developing countries, mainly because of Cuba, if we see. So this is a kind of continuation of that to have an alternative way for reforms, for development. So look to the theme of this 16th BRICS summit. It is strengthening multilateralism for fair global development and security. So that is the word of fair. There is word of global development and also security. So one can easily understand about the future trajectory of this BRICS, right? So I think very positive development, and another very much promising development in this regard, that is the expansion that now is not only limited to these 5 states, but even more states they are going to be engaged in future. And I'm hopeful that even this number that will cross 20 very soon.
Let's talk about that potential, that expansion. Yeah. What does that particular expansion actually depict? Mr. Yasir Janjua, what's your understanding since the inception of this multilateral forum up till now, with expansion going on, more and more countries expressing their interest to become the part of it, what does that basically depict? Is BRICS gaining strength with every single passing day, and has it lived up to that promise, the idea on which it was based upon?
Okay, if you see in the global geopolitical arena, you will see this bloc, which started as BRIC, which was Brazil, Russia, India and China. Eventually South Africa joined and it became BRICS. So these were those economies who were emerging economies. And although most of these countries were also part of the G20, but G20 is very Western dominated and very US dominated. And all other organizations, including World Bank, IMF, United Nations Security Council and General Assembly, you all see them, Americans have a lot of influence. So Russia taking the lead in setting up this organization was a clear signal to their adversaries in the United States that we want to set up an alternative ecosystem whereby trade and development, investment and opportunities for growth will be explored among the member states. So Russia pioneered this revolution. Initially few countries joined, and then now we see the trend is increasing. Last year Pakistan applied for its membership, which is still being considered. After Pakistan, Turkey, Azerbaijan and Malaysia also initiated their application, and so have many other countries. For example, Iran is joining, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia's application is already there. Some people say, why would Saudi Arabia want to join a bloc like BRICS? But every country is exploring new alliances. So for them it's very important. They are seeing new markets, new blocks where they can sell their oil and they can make their investments. However, in my opinion, this is like a signal being given to the Americans. Look, there is another world except the United States as well. And you see organizations like SCO and this organization, they're all signaling that we do not any longer agree to the unipolar world that America has become the champion of after the Cold War era. And after, not even after the Cold War, actually after the demise of the Soviet Union. So that is why these blocs are gaining strength day by day. Otherwise, I mean, a country like Iran, for example, joining BRICS is a clear signal that they are not happy the way they are being dealt with by the West. So they want to be in a committee of nations whereby they are heard, they are listened to. Although we have countries like China and India and Brazil and Russia in this bloc as well, which have a sizable influence in G20 and the rest of the world, still they do not have the leading role. Leading role is always taken by either America or the European countries. So that's why BRICS and, for example, SCO are taking a very advanced level of, you might say, recruitment or interest from other countries, because they are not satisfied with the Western bloc. And I think this is a time for them to collaborate. However, there are shortcomings, there are issues. Hopefully this should not become another bloc which is just a debating contest, basically.
The term that you have just used, shortcomings, I'll use challenges ahead for this particular. Okay, so I'll come back to you to understand what could be the possible challenges, what could be the ways or the mechanisms in order to overcome those challenges as well. Dr. Afridi, now when we talk about this particular statement vis-a-vis Russians hosting this particular summit, does it also give an impression, a message to the West that the efforts the West has been trying to put in since the start of the Ukrainian conflict, it hasn't been able to isolate Russia with that particular aim, given the fact this particular statement by a Kremlin Foreign Affairs advisor? The summit is the largest foreign policy event ever held by Russia, with 36 countries and more than 20 of them represented by heads of state.
I think very much true. The West has been in continuous struggle to isolate Russia diplomatically in an international arena. But if we see, I think that's not the new phenomenon, especially since the onset of the Cold War. We have seen that, just to give a little bit touch, the containment policy, the Truman Doctrine, then the NATO installation, NATO's foundation, then the Hungarian crisis, how it was developed, the Czechoslovakian crisis in 1968. After that, a tussle that was going on between the US and USSR, later on the USSR that was in Afghanistan. So in all these ways, the Western world under the leadership of United States wanted to contain, to block the way of the USSR. After its disintegration, when now we have Russian Federation, so again many challenges Russia is facing vis-a-vis the Western world, or particularly the United States in this regard. No doubt that Russia that is there in the Ukraine war, but if we see during this, or when the clashes started, especially the diplomatic clash with Ukraine. So Russia very much active within the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So many summits held, and Russia played very key and a leading role in this regard. If we see the Moscow conferences on Afghanistan, even before the Doha Agreement, after the Doha Agreement, so Russia is active, and Russia has been hosting so many, delegations across the globe. Even Russia already invited United States for the Moscow conferences. I think this month, on 5th October, there was, in Moscow, the Moscow patron, about Afghanistan. Pakistan was also there. So this is again, if we see Russia was leading and Russia was concerned about Afghanistan for a regional approach to have a kind of, stability within Afghanistan, to have an outstanding, I would say, solution for the Afghanistan problems. And now this thing, I mean the BRICS summit. So these are the very glaring examples that have Russia is not only very much involved, engaged diplomatically with many countries, also these states within the issue or the Moscow format or the Moscow conferences or even this one, the BRICS summit, states they have also have trust in the leadership of Russia, and Russia is also leading. So the tactic, the strategies used by the West, I think are not in use, to block the way of the Russian active engagement.
Right, Mr. Janjua. Now, by the Kremlin Foreign Affairs advisor calling it the largest foreign policy event ever hosted by Russia, what does that basically depict? And how do you think the West is looking at this particular hosting of Russia, of so many countries, and also in this particular forum, as you have already expressed, so many countries expressing their desire to become members?
I wouldn't particularly agree with the statement that this is the largest foreign policy conference. Yes, maybe hosted by Russia, it could be, because the kind of interest that has been generated in the Kazan conference, and in which there's no Western presence. So from that standpoint, this is a very, very huge foreign policy victory for Kremlin. And from that standpoint, Vladimir Putin has definitely scored a milestone by this. Well, he was the country was otherwise the architect of this bloc, but the more and more interest in the bloc is telling the Americans that we are not satisfied with you. Now, as far as the response or reaction of the Americans of the West, obviously they are not happy. You can see clearly there has been no application from any of the Western countries to join this bloc. What does it tell you? That they are not satisfied, they are not happy, they don't want to be part of this. If you ask me or the gentleman who's an expert, look, China and India alone, and Brazil if you include, they probably hold 45% of the world population, 30% of the world area. Who would be naive enough not to be part of a group like this and jump onto this bandwagon? But the Westerns are trying to stay away because Russia is in a leadership role. And obviously the conflicts that we have between the Americans and the Russians, it is in a way it is good that it's not going to achieve.
So if they're not
its
happy,
purposes.
do they understand it as a counterweight to their system,
As
the
of
ecosystem,
now,
as you already described?
As of now, it has not yet reached the status of a counterweight to G7, for example, or IMF, but it's going in that direction. And
With
if it
more and more
continues,
expansion
more and more
happening.
countries joining in, especially many African countries wanting to join in, the countries like Iran and China, for that matter, which are under sanctions by the West. So if they develop an alternative ecosystem for economic development and trade and bilateral trade, do you think they will all remain dependent on the Western monetary system? There might come a stage where they have their own exchange mechanisms, and already, for example, the Chinese currency is being traded in more than 34 countries. So if the BRICS bloc becomes successful, I think there is a need for Americans to think, where did we go wrong? And they must be worried that this is a beginning of something which can take shape of something which can be a counterbalance. If not today, in the years to come, it will definitely be a counterbalance.
Right, Dr. Afridi, I'll come back to you for having your understanding regarding as to how the West looks at this particular forum. For now, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. Mian, his former ambassador. Mr. sanaUllah, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. How are you looking at the significance of this BRICS summit? Russia hosting with over 36 countries participating in it and more expansion happening. Can you hear me, please?
Hello.
Mr. sanaUllah, can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can hear you.
Please go ahead. How are you looking at the significance of this particular high-level moot, the BRICS summit underway in Russia, with Russia hosting it, with many countries expressing the desire to become the members of BRICS?
It is a very important event, and as we go through the journey of BRICS journey, it has developed a lot in the last 15 to 20 years. It has started establishing its own institutions, and it gives some kind of a concrete evidence of hope to developing nations and those who are seeking an alternate to the global financial order right now dominated by US and dollar and that kind of things. And whatever is happening, it is a positive development for countries like China, Russia, UAE, Iran. Some of them are not strong economically. Some of them are very most sanctioned states like Iran and Russia. Right now, it may not be a challenge, and but for the current global financial order. But it is very much on the way to present a serious challenge, and could go either way if the countries like Pakistan, like developing countries from Asia, Africa, and Gulf join, and it entire they use their economic muscles, because how we look at it, the petrol resources economies 40%, and they have the ability to challenge America, and America would be little worried. But right now, it is not that it's not very strong, and that we can start thinking that there would be immediate threat to Americans or American allies, or G7 or G8 countries. I don't think it has got that financial muscles, or it would challenge World Bank or World Bank-based financial global financial order.
You already talked about the possibility of Pakistan becoming the member. We have seen Pakistan applied for the membership back in August 2023. We also know for a fact Russia's Deputy Prime Minister made a public support to Pakistan's bid for becoming the member of BRICS. What's required for Pakistan to become the member of BRICS? More and more support from Russia and China? And what are the potential benefits for Pakistan after it becomes the member of it?
First of all, I would look at it, the concrete possibility of membership for Pakistan. And then I would look at what has happened to those economies which have already become a member of this emerging bloc. I'm hopeful that it would have a very constructive and positive outlook for Pakistan. It will give some opportunity. There is a national new development bank, and it can give loans up to $18 billion. It may be a small amount as compared to World Bank, but still it would be available. But the issue is whether the membership is coming through or not. We are grateful to the Russian support, to Chinese support, and some of others, other countries. But it may not be possible to get the membership during this summit or maybe in next few months. It may take 1 year because Indians and Indians' own influence would work against us, frankly. And then America is not sitting idle, and they are looking at BRICS as a counter force, and would they allow their own countries, their own friends, to help it grow as a formidable bloc? There is a little risk, a little, I would say.
Mr. Mian sanaUllah, former ambassador, thank you very much for joining us on the phone line. We really appreciate that. Dr. Afridi, how is the West looking at Russia specifically hosting this time around this high-level moot?
West.
The Western understanding of Russia hosting this high-level summit this time around, and overall on the bloc's future.
As far as the history, the previous developments of BRICS are concerned, so I think crystal clear about the future of BRICS, that it's expanding, it's promising without any exaggeration. Why? Because more than 45% of the global population that consists of BRICS countries, 40% of the oil production, the oil capacity, those are with the BRICS nations. 42% of the grain production, that is also with the BRICS members. So almost 30% of the world's geography. So if you see all these facts and figures, one can easily understand the future of BRICS. Another thing that's, as I said, it's not only limited to a specific region like NAFTA, like European Union, like African Union, and so many others. It encompasses the almost every region of the world.
It's not a regional forum, rather a transcontinental forum.
Yeah.
So that increases scope.
Its scope, its capacity, its potential for new membership. And on the other hand, even countries, they are not static in this regard. They want to join more and more, right? So I think future is very much promising for the BRICS. And the Western question, that is also very much relevant. West, that is also looking towards ACO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Some of the experts, they say that it's a counterbalance to NATO, which is not yet. Same is the case with the BRICS. It is under the calculations, the strategic calculations of the Western nations. They may devise some strategies, some ways, pathways to have a kind of containment of the BRICS. So it can be, I think, any measure. First, the economic one, then the political one, and if the tensions may arise between the BRICS nations and the Western countries in future, so it may likely go towards even the security tensions, right? But now I think West is looking at cautiously. It is concerned about the BRICS developments, and of course that they are not educating the developments of the BRICS. They are concerned about, especially now, the countries like Pakistan, like Saudi Arabia, very important, like Iran even. If they are joining it, so it means that these countries, they have alliances or strategic partnership with the United States, or they have a position with the United States as far as the case of Iran is concerned. So I mean, both the friends and foes of the Western world or the United States, they are going to join this BRICS organization. So at least that the Western experts, policymakers, they will have their strategic calculations how to counter this BRICS forum.
Right, Mr. Janjua, United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, is also attending this particular summit. He is going to have a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. According to BRICS declaration of this particular summit, the Ukraine situation has also come under deliberation. Firstly, what does the attendance of United Nations Secretary General at this particular summit depict, and how do you think this particular situation in Ukraine is going to be deliberated upon between the two leaders when we talk about Secretary General and Mr. Vladimir Putin?
See, the United Nations Secretary General is invited to a variety of regional forums because no other forum globally has all the world or all the countries of the world covered. So United Nations sits as a body on top of everything else. So there's no harm in engaging with regional forums or with smaller blocs. So I think a dialogue must remain open because it eases his job if there is some bilateral or multilateral engagement at the regional levels or the blocs levels. So it takes off some pressure from the United Nations. So from that standpoint, him going there is actually good because there is engagement. However, for the bloc to become any effective, I think it has to become more of effective rather than just a debating forum, as I said. And that will only happen when the bloc member countries, they resolve their disputes. For example, you've seen only today and yesterday, China and India have agreed to resolve tensions on the Galwan Heights. So if these things start happening within the member countries, more and more countries will be inclined to join this bloc because they will find this is a forum where we can get resolutions. And that should be the aim of this bloc, that the member countries, they encourage trade between themselves, they resolve their dispute, and bilateral cooperation is increased. So if those results are visible, I think this will become even more stronger and people will start feeling comfortable and confident to join the bloc.
Right, Mr. Janjua, you already talked about the sanctions, the Western monetary system. Just before the summit, Russian President Vladimir Putin talked about at the business forum, talking about the new development bank as already serving as an alternative to many Western financial mechanisms. So now, out of these two heads, when we talk about the extensive use of national currencies versus the talk of having a single BRICS currency, which one do you think is doable faster and holds more weight or more credence as to become an alternative to the Western monetary system and avoid sanctions?
I don't think unified BRICS currency is on the horizon in the next foreseeable future. However, one of the leading countries, let's say for example China, they could use their influence and they could use their leverage as a major trading partner with all the membership countries to have their currency become, their national currency become the trading currency for at least the member bloc countries, you know. So that is possible because a unified currency is a very complicated issue. Even in Europe, the countries which are part of EU, some of the countries have not joined the European Monetary Union. Poland, for example, they joined the EU, but they did not join the monetary union because they saw, because that's a complete debate in itself. Because, for example, Czech Republic joined, they joined the monetary union and their economy crashed. So Poland took the example and they said, no, we are not going to follow your footsteps and we will not join the monetary union. Greece did the same. They joined the monetary union and their economy nosedived. So that's why I don't think the bloc in itself is in its infancy to
So what about extensive use of national currencies?
I think that is possible and that will be used because the countries will be inclined and encouraged to walk away from the US dollar. Saudi Arabia, for example.
So does that serve the purpose of, avoiding the sanctions? The extensive
That's
use
one
of
way
the
of
national
thinking
currencies?
about it, yes. to avoid the sanctions and bilateral trade in the currency of the national, the countries, the two countries, or multilateral cooperation. And that is probably people are going at. For example, why do you think Iran is inclined? Russia has sanctions. China has embargoes and sanctions. So all these countries would be inclined to have an alternative system. Now you would say India is on the other side as well. So India is playing on the both sides. But India being the second largest, actually now the largest populated country in the world, why would India want to miss this opportunity to such a huge variety of customers? So they would also want to be part of the system. So I think it's a win-win for all. Even if there is no monetary union in the BRICS countries, there is still a lot to gain and take home for all the countries which become a trading bloc. And this new development bank with the headquarters in Shanghai, this in future could be a counterbalance to IMF, which is hegemonizing the world, which dictates its terms, and who knows it more than we Pakistanis do. They've always been dictating to us their terms. So this new development bank could be a counterbalance. And obviously Americans and the IMF will not be happy, the World Bank will not be happy, because anybody walking away from their clutches, they think they will no longer be reliant on us. But countries like Iran, for example, they have nowhere to go. Joining BRICS, they can at least sell their oil to the countries which are part of the bloc without any problems. Although there will be sanctions and there will be problems, but those problems, when the blocs start becoming bigger and bigger, they can have their strength and they can have their pressure and influence globally, which can deliver what the group wants.
Right. Dr. Afridi, which one of these two is viable? Extensive use of national currencies or the single BRICS currency, especially when we see through the lens of avoiding the sanctions from the West?
I think the use of the national currencies, that is viable. I do agree with my colleague. The single currency now and the foreseeable future and near future, I think it's a bit difficult. The examples already we have from the European Union, even the almost half of the countries are almost half of the European Union members, those have single currency, which is called the Eurozone, right? But still there are very much tensions. I don't want to repeat the words. But they will go for their own national currencies. And as I stated in my first talk, that is the coordination, the collaboration among the member states' central banks. So it is pointing towards the new experiences, lessons they can learn from each other's, their histories, their frameworks of their banks, have their monetary institutions they are working. So national currencies, so far that is in the interest.
Where do you see New Development Bank, its future and the potential?
So far it is good, and if other countries they join, especially the countries which have a huge market of exports and also which have natural resources like Saudi Arabia, like Iran, like many others even in Africa or Central America. So I think then its potential that will be more increased in future, because there are no such kind of conditions which are imposed from the World Bank or IMF on the developing countries like Pakistan. And the process of lending loans, that is also easier. I mean, within 6 months that can be processed. And the third thing, that is the veto power. So there is no such kind of veto from the member states, like if one is a big economy like China and another is not big economy, right, like Egypt, so their vote and lending loans from the new development bank, those votes are equal. So in this regard, we can be very much hopeful for a new role, increased role, and a promising role of new development bank in future.
Right, Mr. Janjua, you already talked about that the conflicts must be dealt with if the efficiency, the functioning, the operationalization of such blocks are to be increased. Now there has been deliberation regarding the situation in Ukraine. Let me quote one excerpt. We emphasize that all states should act consistently with the purpose and principles of the United Nations Charter in their entirety and interrelation. We note with appreciation relevant proposals of mediation and good offices aimed at peaceful resolution of the conflict through dialogue and diplomacy. We've seen in the past Russians welcoming those mediation efforts or the proposals, particularly when we talk about China, the 12-point peace proposal regarding the resolution of the situation in Ukraine. How do you look at that?
See, the Russia-Ukraine situation is complex. On one side is Russia, and behind Ukraine is the entire Western bloc pitched against Russia and putting their guns on the shoulders of Ukrainians. Millions of Ukrainians displaced and killed just because the Westerners want to advance their interests. This could have been resolved in a much more amicable way. What were the Russian demands? Do not advance NATO borders close to Russia. I think, why was NATO so scared of Russia? Ever since Soviet Union's demise, Russia was not challenging them. I think they took the aggressive steps and challenged Russia. Now coming back to your question, the point is the diffusion of tensions or the multilateral disputes. Although BRICS, this is my opinion, the BRICS forum will not be able to sort out or resolve the Russia-Ukraine dispute because per se both are not part of the bloc. Had they been both, there was some hope.
Right.
For example,
but it shows some intention on the part of the bloc.
It
Through
does show some intention,
diplomacy and
will,
good offices of
there will be
mediation.
some diplomatic efforts to resolve this. However, we have to see how much the West is inclined for resolution of this situation.
Point well taken. Unfortunately, we're short of time. One key point to be discussed. I want your understanding regarding as to the case of Pakistan becoming the member of BRICS. What potential lies ahead for Pakistan once it becomes the member, and how to reach over there with more and more Russian and Chinese support? We have seen Russian Deputy Prime Minister.
Russian Foreign Minister has already expressed his public support, and I hear Indians are also now inclined towards the idea of admitting Pakistan into the bloc. And for Pakistan, it's a win-win. In the north, China is a member. East, India is a member. Iran becomes a member. So three borders or three sides of Pakistan countries are already members of BRICS. So it makes sense for Pakistan to be part of the bloc in any ways.
Very naturally so. Very naturally. So, Dr. Afridi, your point regarding Pakistan's potential of becoming, after it becomes the member of BRICS.
I think it is just repeating the history of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Within the issue, China that was lobbying for Pakistan's membership when it was observer, and Russia that was lobbying for India. So when both China and Russia, they became on one page, so both India and Pakistan, they became members in June 2017. So I think it's happening again, and it's welcoming, no doubt, and there is a huge support, and I think the main support from these two countries, China and Russia. Especially it's important for Pakistan investment, for Pakistan's trade, because the economic crunch what we are facing here in Pakistan.
And the kind of geographical proximity Pakistan does have with other BRICS members, as Mr. Janjua has alluded to. Dr. Manzoor Afridi, Foreign Affairs expert, thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Mr. Yasir Janjua, Senior Analyst, thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.